everybody, and welcome to another episode of BacklogBusters, where I'm busting out my game backlog one video at a time and letting you know if after all these years, these games are worth playing today. In this episode, we're pulling the weeds out of our garden and discovering a whole new world in Pikmin 1 and Pikmin 2. I've only had one comment suggesting these games, but there's a new numbered entry coming out after a 10-year gap, so I was really interested in going back to check out these first two. Then, right as I started them up, Nintendo graciously allowed me to re-buy them at a higher resolution on the Switch, so it seemed like the perfect time to finally play through these. Now, unlike most of the other games I played here, I'm not coming in completely blind. I finished Pikmin 3 when it was ported to the Switch in 2020. Now, it's been 3 years, so my memory's a little hazy, but I remember having a great time with Pikmin 3, but I never went back to 1 or 2 out of fear. Because any friends that talked about these first two got that far off look in their eye and muttered about timers and the amount of Pikmin they'd lost. But it's time to be brave and find out what the world of Pikmin was like before Pikmin 3, starting with the history. Pikmin 1 was released for the Nintendo Gamecube on October 26, 2001 in Japan, December 3rd of the same year in North America, then finally in Europe on June 14th of the next year. Following that first game, Pikmin 2 dropped on the Gamecube only 3 years later, April 29, 2004 in Japan, August 30th in North America, and October 8th in Europe. Published by Nintendo and developed by Nintendo, EAD specifically, who are kind of the mainline development group bringing us The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, Mario Kart Double Dash, Super Mario Sunshine, and so much more on the Gamecube and throughout Nintendo's history. I've heard the origin story of Pikmin several times in various forms, that while testing the Gamecube, Miyamoto asked his team to animate the maximum number of possible objects, wanting to see if a game where you controlled 128 or more characters would actually be possible. But according to some translated interviews over at Unseen64, in their search to find a game hidden in that swarm of characters, you were gonna play God, controlling Adam and Eve, watching them live their lives as you messed with things to see how they'd react. Then, as they worked through more gameplay ideas, they landed on using the new C-Stick as a way to control the swarm, later coming up with the idea to grab and throw characters to have them fight mammoth creatures and see how many survive in an almost prehistoric world, and eventually, somehow, morphing into controlling these tiny little colorful Pikmin. Critics seem to really enjoy Pikmin 1, which sits at an 89 with reviewers calling out the cute creatures, the easy-to-learn controls, and the puzzles you'll be trying to solve, but several reviews called out the short length as a negative. Then 3 years later, the sequel was released, with the first game's timer removed, more content, more quality of life features, and multiplayer added, which received 1 single point higher praise from reviewers, with most remarking on the number of improvements and additions over the first game. But with Pikmin 3 out in the wild and 4 about to release, are these first two games worth going back to, and how did they compare to that third game I've already played through? Other than the horrific space accident where the only asteroid in the galaxy forces you to crash land on the surface of a nearby planet, Pikmin 1's just immediately charming, as your pebble-sized character waddles around this world with flowers towering above you. The shift in perspective takes what's basically a random patch of grass next to a puddle and turns it into a huge, almost alien landscape to explore when you're zoomed in this close. Then they introduce Pikmin, which are some of the cutest creatures I've ever seen. The way they move, emote, the noises they make. If you're not immediately attached to these little leaf-headed creatures from the second they show up, I'd be a little concerned. And these kind-hearted Pikmin immediately come to your aid, for some reason responding to your whistle and not at all being bothered by you ripping them from the earth by their hair, I guess, or concerned that your first instinct is to just hurl them at whatever appears in your path. But one single Pikmin's not going to cut it. You're going to need a swarm of them to accomplish your goal of repairing your crashed ship and leaving this planet alive. Luckily, there are flowers all around that feature big numbered, hard candies or sap inside them, which if brought back to your base, rain more Pikmin from the sky. It's such a satisfying system, as each item tells you how many Pikmin are needed to lift it, and you can toss more Pikmin on the problem to bring it back faster. So you're just building up your little army of helpers to deal with a series of team lifts while you trot alongside them and just watch. Now, some of the ship parts are blocked by enemies, walls, hazards, plus you'll only have a limited amount of time each day, with you needing to return to your base before nightfall. So you'll be repeating a loop of plucking your Pikmin, opening shortcuts, planning your route, and trying to retrieve at least one ship part in a single day, and it's just so much fun. At this point in the game, you're basically just assigning a crowd a bunch of tasks, and the fact that it's not only enjoyable to do this, but also simple, I feel like is a real achievement, as while I've played some real-time strategy games where you control armies on the PC, I've never really clicked with any of them on consoles using a controller. Some have done a good job at thinking through the console controls, like Halo Wars or Age of Empires and others, but even though they worked, they never felt as quick or as simple compared to just using a mouse or keyboard. So it's really worth calling out how simple these controls are. You aim and throw Pikmin to have them pick up or attack anything. You can call your Pikmin back with one button press and a flick of the stick, and even calling for an all-out rush or splitting off groups of Pikmin is so simple and quick to do. To me, you can really feel that Nintendo wasn't looking at RTS games and saying, let's make that, but for consoles. Instead, they built every aspect of this game around the controller and figured out how to most efficiently use it to direct these Pikmin around, without tying your fingers in knots or requiring complex combinations of button presses, because they aren't having to support features and controls meant for a 100+ key device and pare things down. It feels like a complete reimagining of what's fun about RTS games, but without being precious about sticking to any existing genre standards, and it's better and much, much more unique for that. Now, I feel like I need to stress how much fun I had with Pikmin 1 in the beginning, when I was just building up my cute little army, defeating small mushroom creatures, and collecting parts for my ship, as Olimar tries to describe why these parts are necessary, but obviously has very little idea what they do. And I've talked in the past about how bad I am at strategy games, and generally, when I played RTS games, I liked building up my armies and towns, but not the battling part. And I wish I could have warned myself that these good times would not last forever, and what started as a cheerful game would soon spiral more into the genre of psychological horror and ground my spirit into dust. The first time I lost a Pikmin in battle, it crushed me. They scream as they are eaten whole, then their spirit literally leaves their body and floats away with a gasping expression. So I adjusted my strategies and only threw Pikmin onto the enemies' backs, which seemed to be safer. But then they introduced snake bird things that just peck at your Pikmin no matter where I seemed to position them, and it didn't help that in my panic, I couldn't seem to aim these Pikmin at the head, which seemingly did more damage, because there's no lock-on found in this game. The losses continued, as I rounded a corner steeling myself to face an unknown new creature, and my entire colorful family was immediately steamrolled, after which I just turned the game off. Even when there were no enemies in sight, whole groups of Pikmin were falling into water instead of walking across a simple ramp, which revealed the forward march ability is less a line and more an oblong mass that's barely controllable as my Pikmin drown all around me. Even on flat ground, a sharp corner of dirt or a tree root can strain my Pikmin, leaving them to be eaten when the sun goes down, as they can't navigate without constant attention. I'm not exaggerating when I say this game wore me down. Maybe I'm as delicate as these little flower creatures, but the more I played, the more I dreaded every single battle, narrow bridge, new hazard, and why on earth are they rubbing it in with the statistic of how many Pikmin have died with a line graph at the end? I still have no idea if I lack some understanding of the strategies or if the commands available to me just weren't quick or efficient enough to get my Pikmin out of harm's way or defeat enemies without huge losses. After being impressed by the controls early on, as the game difficulty seemed to rocket higher and higher, I would have given anything to get new or upgraded abilities, offering a better way to deal with these more aggressive enemies and narrow bridges. Add on to this the 30-day timer, which ticks down as you try to collect at least 25 out of 30 ship parts to get the good ending. Which parts are required? No idea. The game doesn't tell you until you've retrieved the part, so managing to get all 30 parts in 30 days while having to rebuild your decimated teams of Pikmin was one of the most stressful things I've ever done in a game. Luckily, you can replay a day. But it was never just one small mistake that set me back in a given day. It was every single one of the mini combat encounters. And the final boss I retried at least 5 different times, either losing every single one of my Pikmin or having so little time and so few Pikmin left that we couldn't make it back to the ship in time. Out of all the games I've played for this channel so far, this is the only game I've wanted to just stop playing and move on from. Not just because I found the combat frustrating, but because I was stressed every second, wondering if I was wasting my limited time somehow. But most of all, because I felt like nothing I did could prevent the devastating losses of Pikmin. It just made me sad to grow attached to these creatures that just died over and over, and it really made me second guess if my memories of enjoying Pikmin 3 were just false. But I did finish this game, took a few days to emotionally recover, and moved on to Pikmin 2, which I wearily hoped would include some quality of life changes to let me enjoy the parts of Pikmin 1 that I was having fun with before having to do so much combat. So after barely winning the fight for survival in the first game, having Pikmin 2 immediately scrap the ship I worked so hard to build because your employer's fallen into debt, all I could do is laugh. In Olimar's shock, it's discovered that a bottle cap you brought back with you is treasure, and you're immediately shipped back to the Pikmin's homeworld to collect more to pay off that debt. You're assigned a taller, skittish partner to help you with your task, and this game goes right back to the things I enjoy. Sending these adorable Pikmin out to collect things and walk them back to your ship. I was glad to see so much more detail in the worlds around you this time that make the tiny character in a big world effect stand out even more. And you're collecting more human objects, with each one assigned such an intentionally oblivious name that I always looked forward to seeing these revealed. This is what I enjoy. This is what made me want to play the Pikmin games in the first place. This is what I remember enjoying about Pikmin 3 and enjoyed about these first two games. One of my favorite things about the second game is that you've actually got a use for all of your Pikmin this time, in and out of combat. Previously, you used red Pikmin anytime there was an open flame, blue Pikmin for walking through water, and yellow Pikmin were just slightly lighter. So when a puddle or a tall ledge wasn't in the way, I was mostly using red Pikmin for obstacles and enemies. But now, enemies have more attack types and might shoot water at you for your blue Pikmin to deal with, or try to electrocute you, which yellow Pikmin are now impervious to. There are also element-emitting spigots that you'll need to destroy, and so you'll need to keep a few Pikmin of each type around to deal with these new things. But new Pikmin are also introduced, like these bleached white, cave-dwelling Pikmin with red eyes that are immune to poison, and as a side effect will poison enemies if they happen to get eaten. And on top of all this, they're also the fastest Pikmin out there, and they can find buried treasure around the world, which once they locate, other Pikmin can help unearth. Then there's the best Pikmin in this game, the purple Pikmin. These absolute bruisers count for 10 times a normal Pikmin, meaning you're able to demolish the most heavily reinforced paper bags out there. And above all else, they can stun enemies. So you can launch a volley of these first, trigger the stun effect, and then send all your weaker Pikmin in while it's safe to do so. And I'm not exaggerating when I say this completely changed combat for me, to the point where I could actually stomach it and felt like I wasn't helpless against the mouth of an enemy. But Pikmin types and abilities aren't the only new additions to this game. The biggest and most important gameplay change that's plastered right on the box for all to see is take your time and explore. There's no time limit. It was like a weight had been lifted once I found this out. No more stressing about how to find and retrieve 20 items over the next 18 days, or how you'll replenish your Pikmin in time if you just lost a recent fight. You can actually prepare and not be constantly rushed and stressed. Now, there's still only so much time in a given day, and you do need to get your Pikmin back to your ship and into the safety of the upper atmosphere at night. But each time I did this, I was just thinking about what I'd try to accomplish tomorrow. Small, achievable goals, not a 30-day plan. The other half of the bold back-of-the-box proclamation is explore, and it also changes how this game feels, as you're not collecting specific parts and trying to find the 25 required out of the 30 total. Now you're just in this for the money, and can collect any number of random household items and can even turn enemies in while underground for a little extra cash. Which, let's talk about the underground. You can dive into these holes, and it's basically like a little dungeon with several floors, and each one is a self-contained combat or obstacle puzzle, where you need to make it to the next floor by completing them. You can't plant more Pikmin here like normal, instead finding candy pop bulbs to change your Pikmin types, and some that spit out a few extra Pikmin if you're running low while underground. Plus, if you're still stressed about night approaching too fast, going underground pauses the clock, and you can leisurely explore these different environment types, collecting old Nintendo items along with other household treasures. And you'll soon find a radar for your treasures that helps you track them down and handily makes it very clear when you've found all of them on a floor. And that's not all, because you're not just collecting items to lower your debt. Some items reduce your damage taken and increase the whistle range, and more, which are all very helpful as enemies and challenges increase throughout the game. There's so much more new and good here, like the fact that Louie's along for the ride, and you'll be able to pluck Pikmin twice as fast and switch between characters, allowing you to split the party, which really cuts down on the amount of time you spend just watching Pikmin slowly carry something back, or bang on a wall, as you can be exploring while that goes on in the background now. Other small changes like the march command actually making Pikmin walk in a narrow line were welcome changes from the first game, and maybe it was my mind playing tricks on me, but Pikmin seem to get stuck less on corners or leave the group to pull up weeds, and they seem to respond to commands quicker, especially when trying to get Pikmin up and back to me after being thrown off an enemy. Now, let's talk about combat, because I was dreading re-experiencing that feeling of helplessness as my Pikmin were gobbled up in front of me over and over again in the first game. It really feels like there were some behind-the-scenes changes to enemy health, or they were tuned to be less aggressive, maybe big attacks are telegraphed better so I understand how to dodge them. Whatever it was, Pikmin 2 felt worlds easier during combat to me. Also, spending so much time in the more compact underground felt less dangerous to me than the open areas where enemies swarmed you in the first game. Plus, underground, you're warned about what types of enemies and hazards to prepare for before diving in. And if you make a mistake in battle that results in losing Pikmin, you don't have to immediately quit and retry anymore. You can spend time the next day regrowing your team and not feel the pressure of wasting one of the 30 days that you'll never get back. But most of all, having purple Pikmin that could stun enemies and let me plan a 2-stage attack helped more than almost any other change or addition in this second game. Now, not all combat frustrations are gone. You can still lose a ton of progress if you've lost one too many Pikmin to continue on in the underground. As with the day-night timer pause, you can spend 30+ minutes down here, versus the normal 15-minute day you'd have to repeat if you just stayed above ground. Also, I still don't fully understand how to strategically battle in this game, as the steps still seem to be aim for the head or back and throw all your Pikmin, whistle frantically when they fall off, then repeat. But at the very least, having one ability that limited enemies' mobility so that I could more safely attack and lose less of my precious plant people helped both my enjoyment of this game and my sanity. Plus, if you thought the game was too easy and just loved Pikmin 1's brutal combat, there's a whole new area after the credits that I attempted for a few minutes and decided was not for me. But hey, it's there if you'd like a challenge or like seeing a lot of Pikmin lose their lives, which is not something I'm interested in. Now, with all that in mind, how did I feel about these games overall, and would I recommend they be on your backlog? For Pikmin 1, I really wouldn't recommend it. Sure, it kicks off the series and introduces a ton of fun concepts and ideas, but I struggled so much with the combat, with my Pikmin feeling sluggish to respond, getting stuck around every corner, and for a game that does an amazing job about making you feel attached to these Pikmin, why are the enemies so aggressive? I really do hope that I just completely misunderstood the combat and others who played this at launch had a better time, but I just felt sad as nothing seems to prevent all these Pikmin from dying no matter what I seem to try. Pile on the added stress of trying to get enough items within the 30 days, and I just felt like I could never take a breath in this game and enjoy the game or the world. Again, I could just be missing some feature or strategy that would have made this more enjoyable, but while I loved the start of the game, with each passing day and introduction of more dangerous enemies and obstacles, I enjoyed this game less and less, sadly. Then for Pikmin 2, it felt like a complete 180. It seemed immediately more manageable with 2 captains, great quality of life updates, more uses for Pikmin, and the purple variety that provided the first and only viable combat strategy that I could find. What I've discovered is that I really enjoy exploring and collecting things in these games, and Pikmin 2 lets me do that without so much death in the way. Yes, combat's here, and I lost plenty of battles, but without the 30-day countdown, the mountains of stress and regret of the first game allowed me to actually enjoy myself here. So yes, Pikmin 2 is worth playing. And the series is so unique, I do think that you should at least experience a game in the series. Plus, with the story not seemingly being a huge focus, I feel like you could probably almost jump into whatever entry appeals to you the most, with Pikmin 3 being another entry point, with a ton of other quality of life updates and interesting new mechanics like throwing around captains and giving them commands that let you split the group even more effectively. And most of all, with a lock-on ability and even a selectable difficulty that lets you focus more on exploring and collecting than combat. And with Pikmin 4 seemingly introducing even more quality of life changes, as well as bringing the underground back to the series, you've got a Goldilocks amount of options here to pick the Pikmin game that's right for you based on your love of combat, exploration, stress, or whatever might appeal to you the most, and that's great. And I'll throw out my normal message that my opinion on these games is not meant to tarnish any fond memories you have of playing these, and if you loved or still love them, tell me why in the comments below. I'd love to hear about your experience and talk even more about these games. If you're looking to play or replay Pikmin 1 or 2, luckily they've been ported a few times, originally on the Gamecube, which is becoming one of the most expensive consoles to collect for. Later, both games received ports to the Wii with pointer controls for more accurate throwing, and finally, both games have now been released on the Switch as well. So you've got 3 generations of Nintendo consoles in which you can play either of these first 2 games. If you're interested in the third game, you've got the original Wii U version, then the deluxe version on Switch with all the DLC included. And finally, the newest mainline entry, Pikmin 4, will be out on the Switch any day now. It's got an extremely fun demo that I jumped into right after finishing Pikmin 2, and I'm very excited to play more. So other than a not well received 3DS entry, the whole world of numbered Pikmin games are available on the Switch for you to play any day you want. But that's it for this episode of BacklogBusters. Have you played Pikmin 1 and 2? What did you think? Should one or both of these games be on others' backlogs? Let me know. I'd love to talk more about these games. And if you've got a suggestion for another game I should clear off my backlog, please let me know. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the thumbs up button. And if you'd like to see more, tap the subscribe button. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and see you in the next video. Bye.